In the scorching deserts of 7th century Arabia, a revolution was about to begin that would reshape the known world. The death of Prophet Muhammad in 632 CE marked not an end, but a dramatic beginning. What followed was 30 years of extraordinary expansion, conquest, and transformation that would create one of history's most remarkable empires, the Rashidun Caliphate. The word Rashidun means rightly guided in Arabic, referring to the first 4 caliphs who succeeded Muhammad. These were men who had walked alongside the Prophet, learned from him directly, and now faced the monumental task of leading a rapidly growing Islamic community. Their story is one of unprecedented military success, political innovation, and the creation of an empire that stretched from Spain to Central Asia. The crisis of succession, 632 CE. The summer heat of Medina was oppressive on that fateful day in June 632 CE, when the Islamic community faced its first existential crisis. Muhammad, the Prophet of Islam, had died without clearly designating a successor. The question that would shape the future of the Islamic world hung heavy in the air. Who would lead the believers? In a hastily convened meeting at Saqifa Bani Sa'ida, the tribal leaders of Medina gathered in heated debate. The Ansar, the local supporters of Muhammad, argued for one of their own to lead. But Abu Bakr, Muhammad's closest companion and father-in-law, stepped forward with compelling words. "The Arabs will not accept authority except from this tribe of Quraysh," he declared, referring to Muhammad's own tribe. Abu Bakr's political acumen proved decisive. He secured the Pledge of Allegiance, becoming the first caliph, literally meaning successor or representative. But his path to power was not without controversy. Ali ibn Abi Talib, Muhammad's cousin and son-in-law, believed he had a stronger claim to leadership. This moment of disagreement would later fracture the Islamic world into Sunni and Shia branches. But for now, unity prevailed. The 60-year-old Abu Bakr faced immediate challenges that would have overwhelmed lesser leaders. Across the Arabian Peninsula, tribes that had pledged allegiance to Muhammad began to withdraw their support. Some declared their own prophets. Others simply refused to pay the religious tax, known as zakat. The very survival of the nascent Islamic State hung in the balance. The Ridda Wars forging unity, 632 to 633 CE. Abu Bakr's response to the tribal rebellions was swift and decisive. "By Allah," he declared, "I will fight anyone who differentiates between prayer and zakat. If they refuse to give me even a hobbling cord, which they used to give to the Messenger of Allah, I will fight them for it." The Ridda Wars, or Wars of Apostasy, began in earnest. Abu Bakr demonstrated remarkable strategic thinking, appointing multiple military commanders to simultaneously crush rebellions across the peninsula. The most prominent of these was Khalid ibn al-Walid, a former enemy who had converted to Islam and would earn the title Saif Allah al-Maslul, the drawn sword of God. The most formidable challenge came from Musaylima, known derisively as Musaylima the Liar, who claimed prophethood in the region of Najd. His followers were numerous and well organized. At the Battle of Zafar and later at the decisive Battle of Gamra, Khalid's tactical brilliance shone through. Using a combination of cavalry charges and infantry formations learned from years of tribal warfare, the Muslim forces systematically defeated the rebel coalitions. The campaign against Saja, a female claimant to prophethood, showcased the complexity of these conflicts. Initially allying with Musaylima, she eventually negotiated a separate peace, demonstrating the political as well as military dimensions of these wars. By 633 CE, the Arabian Peninsula was unified under Islamic rule for the first time in history. The Ridda Wars had accomplished more than just suppressing rebellions. They had welded the diverse Arab tribes into a formidable military machine. hardened by combat and united by faith and the prospect of conquest. Abu Bakr's Caliphate, the foundation, 632 to 634 CE. Abu Bakr's brief 2-year reign established precedents that would define the caliphate for generations. His first major decision after the Ridda Wars was perhaps his most consequential, the compilation of the Quran. Concerned that the death of Quran memorizers in battle might lead to the loss of revelation, he ordered Zayd ibn Thabit to collect and compile the scattered verses into a single book. But Abu Bakr's vision extended beyond Arabia's borders. Even as the Ridda Wars concluded, he was already planning expeditions into the wealthy territories of the Byzantine and Sassanian empires. These were not mere raiding parties, but carefully planned campaigns of conquest. The decision to invade Iraq and Syria simultaneously demonstrated Abu Bakr's strategic boldness. He understood that the tribal energies unleashed during the Ridda Wars needed direction, and that the promise of booty and new lands would maintain unity among the Arab tribes. More importantly, both the Byzantine and Sassanian empires were weakened by decades of warfare against each other, creating an opportunity that might not come again. Abu Bakr's administrative innovations were equally significant. He established the principle of consultation, shura, in major decisions, created a system for distributing war spoils, and began the process of integrating conquered peoples into the Islamic State. His stipend system for early converts and companions of the Prophet created a loyal administrative class that would prove crucial in managing the expanding empire. The Caliph's personal piety and accessibility became legendary. He continued to milk his own goats and remained approachable to the common people, establishing a tradition of caliphal humility that contrasted sharply with the pomp of Byzantine emperors and Sassanian kings. The conquest of Iraq, 633 to 638 CE. The invasion of Iraq began with Khalid ibn al-Walid's lightning campaign through the desert regions. The Sassanian Empire, already weakened by internal strife and the recent defeat by Byzantium, struggled to mount an effective response to this unexpected threat from the Arabian desert. Khalid's tactical innovations revolutionized warfare in the region. His famous pincer movement at the Battle of Ulayas earned the engagement its grisly nickname, River of Blood. According to historical accounts, so many Persian and Arab Christian forces were killed that the local streams ran red for days. The psychological impact of such decisive victories was enormous, causing many garrison towns to surrender without resistance. The siege and capture of Hira, a major Sassanian administrative center, demonstrated the Arabs' rapidly developing siegecraft. Rather than simply surrounding the city, Muslim forces offered terms that became standard: conversion to Islam, payment of tribute, jizya, or battle. Most cities chose tribute, allowing them to maintain their Christian or Zoroastrian faiths while acknowledging Islamic political authority. The Battle of Kazima showcased Khalid's tactical genius against a formidable opponent. Hormuz, the Persian commander known as Dhul Qarnayn, the two-horned one, challenged Khalid to single combat. The resulting duel became legendary. Khalid's victory over the renowned Persian warrior broke enemy morale and led to a complete rout of Sassanian forces. But conquest was only half the challenge. The Muslims had to govern a sophisticated, urbanized society, very different from the tribal structures of Arabia. They inherited complex irrigation systems, established trade routes, and diverse populations including Persians, Arabs, Arameans, and others. The pragmatic approach taken, maintaining existing administrative structures while introducing Islamic law gradually, proved crucial to the empire's stability. Umar ibn al-Khattab, the Great Expansion, 634 to 644 CE. When Abu Bakr died in 634 CE, he had already designated his successor, Umar ibn al-Khattab. The choice surprised many, as Umar was known for his stern demeanor and uncompromising nature. Before his conversion, he had been one of Islam's fiercest opponents. The story of his dramatic conversion, rushing to kill Muhammad but instead embracing Islam after hearing Quranic verses, had become legendary. Umar's personality was perfectly suited to the challenges facing the rapidly expanding Islamic State. Where Abu Bakr had been gentle and consultative, Umar was decisive and often harsh. His famous saying, "I was appointed over you not to multiply your wealth, but to teach you your religion and your way of life," captured his approach to governance. One of Umar's first decisions proved to be masterstroke, the recall and reassignment of Khalid ibn al-Walid from Iraq to Syria. While Khalid's military genius was undeniable, Umar worried that the army was becoming too dependent on one commander. "I have not dismissed Khalid because of any anger or betrayal," Umar explained, "but because people were devoted to him and I feared they would depend on him." Under Umar's leadership, the Islamic Empire expanded at an unprecedented rate. His systematic approach to conquest, administration, and integration of conquered peoples created the foundation for what would become one of history's most enduring empires. The Conquest of Syria, 634 to 638 CE. The Syrian campaign began during Abu Bakr's reign, but reached its climax under Umar. 4 separate armies invaded Syria from different directions, a strategy designed to prevent the Byzantines from concentrating their forces effectively. The commanders, Abu Ubaidah, Amr ibn al-As, Yazid ibn Abi Sufyan, and Shurabil ibn Hassan, were experienced veterans of the Ridda Wars. The terrain and opposition in Syria differed dramatically from Iraq. The Byzantines had ruled Syria for centuries and had strong support among the Christian Arab tribes. The countryside was dotted with powerful fortified cities, and the Byzantine army was far more organized and disciplined than the scattered Sassanian forces in Iraq. The arrival of Khalid ibn al-Walid from Iraq changed everything. His legendary march across the Syrian desert, covering over 500 miles in just 18 days, brought fresh troops and, more importantly, the psychological boost of Islam's greatest military commander. The timing was perfect, as Byzantine forces under Vahan had concentrated near Damascus for a decisive confrontation. The Battle of Yarmouk in 636 CE stands as one of history's most consequential engagements. Emperor Heraclius had assembled the largest Byzantine army in decades. Estimates suggest over 40,000 men, including Armenian and Arab Christian allies. The Muslim force was smaller, but possessed superior mobility and morale. Khalid's tactical masterpiece at Yarmouk combined feigned retreats, cavalry charges, and the innovative use of mounted archers. When dust storms reduced visibility, Muslim forces used their superior knowledge of the terrain to outflank and encircle Byzantine positions. The result was catastrophic for Byzantium. The cream of their eastern army was destroyed, and Syria lay open to conquest. The siege of Jerusalem in 638 CE presented unique challenges. Unlike other cities, Jerusalem held immense religious significance for Christians, Jews, and Muslims alike. Patriarch Sophronius agreed to surrender only to Caliph Umar personally, recognizing the gravity of the moment. Umar's entry into Jerusalem became one of the most celebrated episodes of his reign. Riding a simple camel and wearing patched clothes, he presented a stark contrast to the pomp expected of conquerors. His treaty with the city's Christian inhabitants, the Covenant of Umar, guaranteed protection for their lives, property, and religious practices while establishing Islamic political control. The Conquest of Egypt, 639 to 642 CE. The conquest of Egypt began with the ambitious vision of Amr ibn al-As, the conqueror of southern Palestine. Recognizing Egypt's strategic and economic importance, he sought Umar's permission to invade. The Caliph's initial reluctance stemmed from concerns about overextension and the complexity of governing such a sophisticated society. Umar's argument was compelling. Egypt's wealth could fund further conquests. Its position controlled the sea route between Constantinople and Alexandria, and its grain shipments were crucial to Byzantine survival. Umar's eventual approval came with strict instructions. If Umar had already entered Egypt when the message arrived, he could continue. If not, he should return. The invasion began in late 639 CE with a force of only 4,000 men, a testament to Arab confidence and Byzantine weakness. The fortress of Babylon, Old Cairo, controlled river traffic on the Nile and represented the key to Egypt. Its siege lasted 7 months and showcased the Arabs' growing sophistication in siege warfare. The Battle of Heliopolis in 640 CE saw the defeat of a combined Byzantine Coptic army under the patrician Cyrus al-Muqawqis. The victory opened Lower Egypt to Muslim conquest and demonstrated the limited support for Byzantine rule among Egypt's Coptic Christian majority, who had suffered under religious persecution. Alexandria, the jewel of the Eastern Mediterranean, presented the greatest challenge. Founded by Alexander the Great and seat of ancient learning, the city boasted massive walls, a harbour defended by a lighthouse, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, and a determined garrison. The siege lasted 14 months, finally ending when the city's leaders negotiated surrender terms in September 641 CE. The administrative challenges in Egypt were immense. The country's economy depended on the precise management of Nile flood cycles, complex irrigation systems, and vast agricultural estates. Umar's decision to maintain existing administrative structures while introducing Islamic legal and tax systems proved crucial to Egypt's continued prosperity. Administrative revolution under Umar's genius lay not just in conquest, but in creating systems to govern the expanding empire. Faced with ruling territory stretching from Libya to Central Asia, he developed administrative innovations that would influence Islamic governance for centuries. The establishment of garrison cities, Amsar, represented perhaps his most significant innovation. Rather than dispersing Arab troops throughout conquered territories, Umar concentrated them in new settlements like Basra and Kufa in Iraq and Fustat in Egypt. These cities served multiple purposes. They maintained Arab military readiness, prevented the dilution of Islamic identity through excessive contact with local populations, and created centers of Islamic learning and culture. Umar's tax system balanced practical needs with Islamic principles. The jizya, poll tax, on non-Muslims was set at rates that encouraged conversion without being confiscatory. The kharaj, land tax, maintained agricultural productivity while funding the expanding military. Most innovatively, Umar established the first systematic pension system, D1, providing stipends to early Muslim converts, veterans, and their families based on their service to Islam. The judicial system Umar created blended Islamic law with practical necessity. He appointed qadis, judges, to major cities, while allowing local communities to maintain their own legal traditions in matters not directly touching Islamic concerns. His famous instructions to judges emphasized justice, accessibility, and the equal treatment of all people, regardless of social status. Umar's urban planning initiatives transformed conquered cities. He ordered the widening of streets to accommodate growing populations, established markets with standardized weights and measures, and created public facilities including mosques that served as community centers, not just places of worship. The Persian Conquest, 636 to 651 CE. The final destruction of the Sassanian Empire was a gradual process that began with early raids and culminated in the complete conquest of Iran during Umar's reign. The Battle of Qadisiyah in 636 CE marked the turning point in this campaign. Rustam, the Sassanian commander at Qadisiyah, was arguably the most capable general the Muslims had yet faced. His forces included war elephants, heavily armoured cavalry, and disciplined infantry formations that had dominated Middle Eastern warfare for centuries. The battle lasted 3 days, with the outcome often in doubt. The Muslim victory at Qadisiyah resulted from superior morale, tactical flexibility, and the legendary charge of the Banu Tamim tribe that broke Sassanian lines at the crucial moment. Rustam's death in the battle demoralized Persian forces, and the road to Ctesiphon lay open. The capture of Ctesiphon, the Sassanian capital, yielded unprecedented wealth. The royal treasury contained treasures accumulated over 4 centuries, including the famous spring carpet of Khosrow's, woven with gold thread and encrusted with jewels. When the booty was distributed according to Islamic law, even common soldiers received shares that made them wealthy by Arabian standards. The conquest of Iran's eastern provinces proved more challenging than the capture of major cities. The terrain was mountainous, the population diverse, and local rulers often continued resistance from fortified positions. The process required patient sieges, diplomatic negotiations, and the gradual integration of Persian nobility into Islamic administration. The Battle of Nahavand in 642 CE, known as the Victory of Victories, finally broke organized Sassanian resistance. The defeat of a massive Persian army attempting to reconquer lost territories demonstrated the permanence of Muslim conquest. Yazdegerd III, the last Sassanian king, fled eastward and was eventually murdered by his own governors in 651 CE, ending 4 centuries of Persian imperial rule. The assassination of Umar, 644 CE. At the height of his power and the empire's expansion, Umar fell victim to a personal grievance that reflected the growing complexity of ruling such a diverse empire. Abu Lu'lu'a, a Persian slave skilled in carpentry and engineering, had approached Umar seeking relief from what he considered an excessive tax burden imposed by his master. When Umar investigated and found the tax reasonable, Abu Lu'lu'a felt his petition had been unjustly rejected. On November 3rd, 644 CE, while leading the dawn prayer in the Prophet's mosque in Medina, Umar was stabbed multiple times by the aggrieved slave, who then killed himself. Umar's final actions demonstrated his character. Despite mortal wounds, he completed the prayer and then appointed a 6-man council to choose his successor. His choices: Ali ibn Abi Talib, Uthman ibn Affan, Abd al-Rahman ibn Auf, Zubair ibn al-Awwam, Talha ibn Ubaidullah, and Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas were all early converts and companions of the Prophet. The succession council represented Umar's attempt to avoid the confusion that had followed Muhammad's death. By limiting the choice to 6 respected figures and requiring consensus, he hoped to ensure legitimacy for his successor. However, the process would prove more contentious than anticipated. Uthman ibn Affan, Prosperity and Crisis, 644 to 656 CE. The election of Uthman ibn Affan as the 3rd Caliph came after intense negotiations within Umar's succession council. Abd al-Rahman ibn Auf, serving as mediator, ultimately chose Uthman over Ali, a decision that would have profound consequences for Islamic history. Uthman brought different qualities to the caliphate. A wealthy merchant from the Umayyad clan, he had been one of Islam's earliest converts and had twice married daughters of the Prophet. His generosity in supporting early Muslim causes had earned Muhammad's gratitude, but he lacked the commanding presence of his predecessors. The early years of Uthman's reign saw continued expansion. Muslim fleets began challenging Byzantine naval supremacy in the Mediterranean, capturing Cyprus in 649 CE and defeating the Byzantine navy at the Battle of the Masts in 655 CE. These victories opened the sea routes to Muslim commerce and set the stage for future conquests of Mediterranean islands. The completion of the Quran standardization under Uthman addressed growing concerns about textual variations. As Islam spread among non-Arabic speakers, different pronunciations and dialectal readings threatened to fragment the holy text. Uthman's decision to establish a single, authoritative version and destroy variants, while controversial, preserved Quranic unity for posterity. However, Uthman's reign also saw the emergence of serious problems. His appointment of relatives to key provincial positions sparked accusations of nepotism. The Umayyad governors, while often capable, were seen as representing the interests of Mecca's former elite, rather than the broader Muslim community. Economic grievances compounded political tensions. The vast wealth flowing from conquests was unevenly distributed, creating disparities between regions and social groups. Egyptian and Iraqi veterans complained that newer converts were receiving preferential treatment, while established garrison cities felt neglected in favor of Syrian interests. The rebellion that eventually engulfed Uthman's Caliphate began in Egypt, where grievances against the governor Abdullah ibn Sa'd ran deep. A delegation of Egyptian Muslims travelled to Medina to present their complaints directly to the Caliph. Initially, Uthman agreed to their demands and recalled the unpopular governor. However, the rebels intercepted a letter allegedly from Uthman to the Egyptian governor ordering harsh punishment for the complainants. Whether the letter was genuine or forged remains historically disputed, but its discovery inflamed the situation beyond repair. The Egyptians returned to Medina, joined by supporters from Iraq and other provinces, demanding Uthman's abdication. The siege of Uthman's house lasted several weeks. The elderly caliph, now in his 80s, refused to flee or abdicate, believing that the caliphate was a trust from God that could not be abandoned. His assassination on June 17, 656 CE, while reading the Quran, marked the end of the Rashidun Caliphate's period of unity and expansion. Ali ibn Abi Talib, the First Civil War, 656 to 661 CE. Ali's accession to the Caliphate fulfilled the hopes of his supporters, but came at the worst possible moment. The murder of Uthman had divided the Muslim community, and demands for justice complicated Ali's position from the beginning. His immediate challenges were immense: restore order in Medina, deal with Uthman's supporters' demands for vengeance, and maintain the unity of an empire showing signs of fracture. The Battle of the Camel in 656 CE represented the first armed conflict between Muslims since the Ridda Wars, but with a crucial difference. This was Muslim fighting Muslim, not believers fighting apostates. Aisha, the Prophet's widow, along with Talha and Zubayr, both members of Umar's succession council, challenged Ali's authority and demanded justice for Uthman's murder. The battle near Basra was named for the camel carrying Aisha's howdah, which became the focal point of the fighting. Ali's victory was decisive but Pyrrhic. It eliminated immediate challenges to his authority, but deepened divisions within the Muslim community. The deaths of Talha and Zubayr, both prominent companions of the Prophet, shocked the Islamic world. More serious was the challenge from Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan, the powerful governor of Syria and Uthman's cousin. Muawiyah had ruled Syria for nearly 2 decades, building a loyal power base and a disciplined army. His refusal to acknowledge Ali's authority unless Uthman's murderers were first punished created a deadlock that would define the remainder of Ali's reign. The Battle of Siffin in 657 CE was the largest engagement of the civil war, involving armies of over 100,000 men. For months, the forces maneuvered and skirmished along the Euphrates River. When full battle finally erupted, Ali's forces appeared to be gaining the upper hand, until Muawiyah's supporters raised copies of the Quran on their spears, calling for arbitration according to God's word. Ali's acceptance of arbitration proved controversial among his own supporters. A significant faction, later known as the Kharijites, believed that accepting arbitration showed weakness and compromised Ali's religious authority. Their slogan, "No judgment but God's," reflected their belief that the matter should be decided by battle, not negotiation. The arbitration process, held at Adru in 658 CE, ended unsatisfactorily for all parties. The arbitrators failed to reach a clear decision about the Caliphate's legitimacy, leaving both Ali and Muawiyah claiming authority. This outcome satisfied no one and led to further fragmentation of the Muslim community. The Kharijite rebellion added a third faction to an already complex civil war. Their egalitarian ideology that any pious Muslim, regardless of tribal affiliation, could be caliph, appealed to many Arabs who felt excluded from power by traditional tribal hierarchies. However, their rigid interpretation of Islamic law and willingness to declare other Muslims apostates made them dangerous to established authority. Ali's final years were spent fighting Kharijite insurgencies, while Muawiyah gradually consolidated control over additional provinces. The Caliph's assassination in 661 CE by Ibn Muljam, a Kharijite seeking revenge for Ali's campaigns against his sect, ended the Rashidun Caliphate and opened the way for Muawiyah to establish the Umayyad dynasty, the legacy of the Rashidun. The Rashidun Caliphate's 30-year span created an empire that stretched from Spain to Central Asia, but its significance extends far beyond territorial conquest. The four caliphs established precedents, institutions, and traditions that would influence Islamic civilization for centuries. Militarily, the Rashidun period demonstrated the effectiveness of combining Arab tribal warfare traditions with strategic innovation. The development of combined arms tactics, the use of mounted archers, and the integration of siege techniques learned from conquered peoples created a military system that remained formidable for generations. Administratively, the Rashidun Caliphs faced the unprecedented challenge of governing diverse populations with different languages, religions, and legal traditions. Their solutions, the garrison city system, the integration of local administrative structures, and the development of Islamic law, provided models for subsequent Muslim empires. The economic impact was equally profound. The influx of wealth from conquests transformed Arab society from pastoral nomadism to imperial administration. The development of trade networks connecting the Indian Ocean to the Mediterranean created prosperity that funded further expansion and cultural development. Perhaps most importantly, the Rashidun period established the fundamental tension between Islamic idealism and practical governance that would characterize Muslim political thought for centuries. The early caliphs' attempts to balance religious principles with imperial necessities created precedents that later rulers would invoke or reject depending on their circumstances. The conversion patterns established during this period shaped the religious geography of the Middle East and beyond. The relatively tolerant approach to non-Muslims, combined with social and economic incentives for conversion, led to the gradual Islamization of conquered territories without the mass violence that characterized some religious conquests. The end of an era. The death of Ali in 661 CE marked not just the end of a caliphate, but the conclusion of a unique period in Islamic history. Never again would the Muslim community be led by individuals who had known the Prophet personally, who had participated in the earliest Islamic struggles, and who embodied the idealistic spirit of the religion's founding generation. Muawiyah's establishment of the Umayyad Caliphate represented a fundamental shift from the consultative, relatively egalitarian governance of the Rashidun to a more traditional imperial model. The capital's move from Medina to Damascus symbolized this transformation, from the austere environment of Arabia to the sophisticated urban culture of Syria. The division of Islam into Sunni and Shia branches, while having roots in the succession crisis after Muhammad's death, crystallized during the civil wars of Ali's reign. The different interpretations of legitimate authority, the role of the family of the Prophet, and the nature of Islamic leadership would create distinct religious traditions that persist today. The Kharijiti movement, though politically unsuccessful, established important precedents for Islamic thought. Their emphasis on individual piety over tribal affiliation, their democratic ideals, and their rigorous interpretation of Islamic law influenced later reform movements and theological debates. The territorial extent of Rashidun conquests provided the foundation for Islamic civilization's golden age. The libraries of Alexandria, the administrative traditions of Persia, the commercial networks of Syria, and the agricultural wealth of Iraq and Egypt combined to create the material basis for unprecedented cultural and scientific achievement. The rightly guided legacy. As the sun set on the Rashidun Caliphate in 661 CE, it illuminated an empire that had transformed the known world in just 3 decades. From the tribal confederations of Arabia had emerged a multi-ethnic, multilingual empire that governed perhaps 20 million people across 3 continents. The title Rashidun, the rightly guided, was bestowed by later generations who look back on this period as Islam's golden age of leadership. Whether this nostalgia accurately reflects historical reality remains debated, but the achievements of Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, and Ali in creating and governing the early Islamic empire are undeniable. The military conquests that created this empire were remarkable not just for their scope, but for their speed and relative restraint. Unlike many imperial conquests, the Rashidun expansion generally respected local populations, preserved existing institutions where possible, and created space for cultural and religious diversity within an Islamic political framework. The administrative innovations developed during this period, from the garrison city system to the integration of diverse legal traditions, demonstrated a practical flexibility that allowed rapid adaptation to governing sedentary populations. These systems provided stability during a period of dramatic change and created the foundation for centuries of Islamic imperial rule. Perhaps most significantly, the Rashidun period established Islam as a world religion and civilization, not merely a regional Arabian movement. The encounter between Islamic principles and the diverse cultures of conquered territories created the synthetic civilization that would, in subsequent centuries, preserve and extend human knowledge in fields from astronomy to philosophy. The civil wars that marked the Caliphate's end demonstrated both the strengths and weaknesses of the early Islamic political system. While the commitment to consultation and religious principles provided legitimacy and moral authority, the lack of clear succession mechanisms created instability that would plague Islamic states throughout history. The 4 Rashidun Caliphs, each facing unprecedented challenges with limited precedents to guide them, created through their responses a body of Islamic political thought and practice that influenced Muslim societies for over a millennium. Their successes and failures alike provided lessons that subsequent generations of Islamic leaders would study, interpret, and apply to their own circumstances. Today, 14 centuries after the last Rashidun Caliph fell to an assassin's blade, the period continues to serve as both inspiration and cautionary tale for those seeking to understand the relationship between religious idealism and political power. The Rashidun Caliphate's brief but brilliant trajectory across the stage of world history reminds us that even in humanity's most challenging moments, visionary leadership and principled action can reshape civilization itself. The desert winds that once carried the call to prayer from Medina to Damascus, from Cairo to Isfahan, still echo with the memory of those 30 remarkable years when 4 men guided an empire and forever changed the world.